This is a reading from Occult Science. It's also featured in the six essential exercises within the book Start Now, a book of soul and spiritual exercises by Rudolf Steiner, edited and introduced by Christopher Bamford. There are certain qualities that should be acquired through practice by those who want to find the way into the higher world. Before all else, these emphasize the soul's mastery over its train of thought, its will, and its feelings. The method for bringing about such mastery through practice has two goals. First, the practice is meant to imbue the soul with stability, certainty, and equilibrium to the extent that it retains these qualities even when a second I is born out of it. Second, it is meant to give this second eye strength and support for its journey. What our thinking needs most of all for spiritual training is objectivity. In this regard, life is the great teacher of the I in the physical world. If the soul chose to allow its thoughts to wander aimlessly, life would immediately correct. It would not allow our thinking to come into conflict with life. The soul's thinking must correspond to the actual course of life's realities. When we turn our attention away from the physical world of the senses, we are no longer subject to its automatic correction. Our thinking will go astray if it is not able to self-correct. This is why students of the spirit must train their thinking so that it can set its own direction and goals. Their thinking must teach itself inner stability and the ability to stick strictly to one subject. For this reason, the appropriate thought exercises we undertake should not deal with unfamiliar and complicated objects, but with ones that are simple and familiar. Over a matter of months, if we can overcome ourselves to the point of being able to focus our thoughts for at least 5 minutes a day on some ordinary object, for example, a pen, a pencil, or the like, and if, during this time, we exclude all thoughts unrelated to this object, we will have made a big step in the right direction. We can consider a new object each day or stay with the same one for several days. Even those who consider themselves thinkers because of their scientific education should not scorn this means of preparing themselves for spiritual training. Because if we fix our thoughts on something very familiar for a certain period of time, we can be certain that we are thinking objectively. If we ask, what is a pencil made of? How are these materials prepared? How are they put together to make pencils? When were pencils invented? And so on. Our thoughts correctly correspond to reality much more closely than they do if we think about the origin of human beings or the nature of life. Simple thought exercises are better for developing objective thinking about the Saturn, Sun, and Moon phases of evolution than any complicated scholarly ideas. Because what we think about is not the point, at least initially. The point is to think objectively, using our own inner strength. Once we have taught ourselves objectivity by practicing on sense-perceptible physical processes that are easily surveyed, our thinking becomes accustomed to striving for objectivity, even when it does not feel constrained by the physical world of the senses and its laws. We break ourselves of the habit of allowing our thoughts to wander without regard for the facts. The soul must become a ruler in the domain of the will, just as it is in the world of thoughts. Here again, life itself appears as the controlling element in the physical world of the senses. It makes us need certain things, and our will feels aroused to satisfy these needs. For the sake of higher training, we must get used to strictly obeying our own commands. If we do this, we will become less and less inclined to desire non-essentials. Dissatisfaction and instability in our life of will, however, are based on desiring things without having any clear concept of realizing these desires. This dissatisfaction can disrupt our entire mental life when a higher I is trying to emerge from the soul. A good exercise to tell ourselves to do something daily at a specific time over a number of months. Today, at this particular time, I will do this. We then gradually become able to determine what to do and when to do it in a way that makes it possible to carry out the action in question with great precision. In this way, we rise above damaging thoughts such as, I'd like this, I want to do that, which disregard totally the feasibility of what we want. In Faust, Goethe put these words into the mouth of his seeress Manto. I love whomever longs for the impossible, unquote. Goethe himself, Goethe himself, quote, said, living in ideas means treating the impossible as if it were possible, unquote. These statements, however, should not be used as objections to what has been presented here, because what Goethe and his seeress Manto ask can be accomplished only by those who have trained themselves in desiring what is possible in order to then be able to apply their strong will to, quote, impossibilities, unquote, in a way that transforms them into possibilities. For the sake of spiritual training, the soul should also acquire a certain degree of composure with regard to the domain of feeling. For this to happen, the soul must master its expressions of joy and sorrow, pleasure and pain. Many prejudices become evident with regard to acquiring this particular quality. We might imagine that we would become dull and unreceptive to the world around us if we could not empathize with rejoicing or pain. However, that is not the point. The soul should rejoice when there is reason to rejoice and should feel pain when something sad happens. It is only meant to master its expressions of joy and sorrow, of pain and displeasure. With this as our goal, we will soon notice that rather than becoming dulled to the pleasurable and painful events in our surroundings, the opposite is true. We are becoming more receptive to these things than we were previously. Admittedly, acquiring this character trait requires strict self-observation over a long period of time. We must make sure that we are able to empathize fully with joy and sorrow without losing ourselves and expressing our feelings involuntarily. What we are meant to suppress is not our justified pain, but involuntary weeping, not our abhorrence of a misdeed, but blind rage, not alertness to danger, but fruitless fear, and so on. Exercises like this are the only way for students of the spirit to acquire the mental tranquility that is needed to prevent the soul from leading a second unhealthy life, like a shadowy double, alongside the higher I when this I is born, and especially when it begins to be active. Especially with regard to these things, it is important not to succumb to self-deception. It can easily seem to people that they are already possess a certain equilibrium in ordinary life, and that they therefore do not need this exercise. But in fact, it is doubly necessary for people like this. It's quite possible to be calm and composed in confronting things in ordinary life, and yet have our suppressed lack of equilibrium assert itself all the more when we ascend into a higher world. It is essential to realize that for the purposes of spiritual training, what we seem to possess already is much less important than systematically practicing what we need to acquire. This sentence is quite correct, regardless of how contradictory it may seem. No matter what life may have taught us, what we teach ourselves is what serves the purposes of spiritual training. If life has taught us excitability, we need to break that habit. But if it has taught us complacency, we need to shake ourselves up through self-education so that our soul's reactions correspond to the impressions they receive. People who cannot laugh at anything have as little control over their lives as people who are constantly provoked to uncontrollable laughter. An additional way of training our thinking and feeling is by acquiring a quality we can call positivity. The erroneous, the bad, and the ugly must not prevent the soul from finding the true, the good, and the beautiful wherever they are present. We must not confuse this positivity with being artificially uncritical or arbitrarily closing our eyes to things that are bad, false, or inferior. It is possible to admire a dead animal's beautiful teeth and still see the decaying corpse. The corpse does not prevent us from seeing the beautiful teeth. We cannot consider bad things good and false things true, but we can reach the point where the bad does not prevent us from seeing the good and errors do not keep us from seeing the truth. Our thinking undergoes a certain maturing process in connection with the will when we attempt to never allow anything we have experienced to deprive us of our unbiased receptivity to new experiences. For students of the spirit, the thought, quote, "I've never heard of that. I don't believe it," unquote, should totally lose its meaning. During specific periods of time, we should be intent on using every opportunity to learn something new concerning everything and every being. If we are ready and willing to take previously unaccustomed points of view, we can learn from every current of air, every leaf, every babbling baby. At any given stage in life, we should not disregard all our previous experiences. We should indeed judge what we are experiencing in the present on the basis of past experiences. This belongs on one side of the scales. On the other, however, students of the spirit must place their inclination to constantly experience new things, and especially their faith in the possibility that new experiences will contradict old ones. We have now listed 5 soul qualities that students in a genuine spiritual training need to acquire: control of one's train of thought, control of one's will impulses, composure in the face of joy and sorrow, positivity in judging the world, and receptivity in one's attitude toward life. Having spent certain periods of time practicing these qualities consecutively, we will then bring them into harmony with each other in our souls. We will need to practice them in pairs or in combinations of 3 or one at a time, and so on. We can also do them based on the months in order to bring them into harmony. And this is again from an outline of esoteric science, also known as an outline of occult science. It's also from the book Start Now, a book of soul and spiritual exercises from Christopher Bamford. He put this together from the works of Rudolf Steiner, and this was pages 114 through 118. Thank you.